When you visit Fred Allen in Good Neighbor, he's pleased to see you, but he needs your help.
I love you. If all my customers were you, that would be super swell. You know the gunners, right? The high-end mercenaries? Well, a few of them were talking about scavenging around that old Hallucigen building. I mean, just think about that name. There's gotta be some shit there that's out of this world. You get me something, I pay you 200 caps.
You said there were gunners out there?
The blackest-hearted mercs around, friend. Well-armed, organized. So, make sure they don't catch you.
All right, Fred. We have a deal.
You're the best. The absolute best.
He sends you to the Hallucigen building to find any kind of chemicals that might be handy in making chems. Upon arriving, you find evidence of the gunners that Fred told you about. There are bodies strewn outside the door. When we enter, your companion will likely talk about the smell.
Repeat. A chemical leak has been detected.
Can't breathe.
Please evacuate the building immediately.
It smells strange.
There is some sort of gas in the air, and it looks like it's affecting gunner behavior. We find a firefight already going on between gunners above you. They not only attack you, but they also attack each other. Exploring this lobby area, we find what at first looks like simple cartons of dirty water, but are actually called drugged water. Heals 20 hit points, adds 7 radiation, but it also removes 1 perception. These effects stack the more drugged water you take, so you could completely annihilate your accuracy in VATS by taking too many cartons of drugged water. On the table, we find a note called Help Wanted. We learned that this company, whatever this company is, was offering part-time work to people coming in off the street. No long-term commitments, no experience necessary. Anyone interested could come to Hallucigen and agree to participate in the test. You can also find one of these Help Wanted notes in one of the mailboxes at Jamaica Plain. This is another way to get the location on your map without talking to Fred. The reception terminal connects many of these clues together and begins to paint a terrifying picture. Receptionists were to verbally confirm that the visitor is a potential test subject and not a client. This is important because they treat these two people differently. If a test subject, they then offer refreshments. We can assume that these refreshments are the drugged water. Hallucigen then gives the subject a bunch of forms to fill out, not because they need the forms filled out, but because they want the drugs in the water to take effect. They say, this should allow sufficient time for the sedative in the water to take effect. Once the visitor is asleep, the receptionist is to notify the appropriate lab personnel, and then the receptionist, not the visitor, finishes completing the visitor's forms, including the accident report and the fatal accident report. Not only were they drugging visitors and kidnapping them, but they were forging government documents. The final note is procedures for chemical emergencies. They say that a chemical leak is unlikely, but if something were to happen, first and foremost, the executive staff evacuates immediately. Of course, we've got to get the CEO out of the doors. Then the scientists will terminate any ongoing experiments. Disturbingly, the lab manager takes a look at the test subjects and then decides whether or not to evacuate them or lock down the test chambers, leaving them exposed to the chemicals. Clearly, this company Hallucigen is performing experiments on United States citizens who simply came through the front door looking for extra work. These aren't criminals, these aren't asylum inmates, these are just normal everyday people walking through the front door looking for a job. As we move forward, every room we stumble upon has dead gunners inside. We hear a voice over the PA system saying that a chemical leak is detected.
Repeat. A chemical leak has been detected. Please evacuate the building immediately.
Whatever chemical has leaked throughout the building is turning the gunners insane. They're turning on each other. They're firing upon each other. They're becoming paranoid. You, the sole survivor, do not appear to be affected yet, but that will change. We'll get to that later. Continuing on and rounding the corner, we find a room with 3 gunners all attacking each other. If you were to kill 2 and leave 1 alive, that gunner would then attack you, so you have no other choice than to kill them all. In this room, we find the research terminal, which tells us a little bit more about the chemical that has leaked throughout the building. In the lab reports section, we find a lab report about Hallucigen gas. The goal of this gas is for riot pacification, and the delivery vehicle is in a Type 2 fragmentation grenade. We learn how test subjects responded to being exposed to the Hallucigen gas. 2 of the 5 test subjects were injured by the delivery vehicle, by the grenade explosion. Only 1 of those was injured seriously. All 5 of the test subjects suffered traumatic adrenal gland rupture due to gas exposure, resulting in hallucinations, erratic behavior, and increased aggression. Of those 5, 4 of them died during the ensuing melee, and 1 died to heart failure. This is horrible. This company is taking in people off the street, drugging them, knocking them out, kidnapping them, and then conducting tests on them that are fatal. But the scientists don't have a lick of remorse. Their ending thought in this line is, at the concentrations required for wide area dispersal, massive adrenaline surges occur. We recommend revising the chemical substrate. All they're worried about is how the chemical works. But the hallucinogen gas is not the only thing they were working on here. They were also working on something called the eradicator. The goal of this eradicator was for field decontamination, possibly killing airborne viruses. Now, the eradicator was successful. 49 of the 50 biochemical contaminants were neutralized. It did kill the biochemical contaminants. But 3 of the 3 exposed test subjects suffered lethal doses of radiation. Not only did it kill the biochemicals, it killed the people in the building. The final note is that the test chamber was so heavily irradiated that it destroyed the test chamber. They had to replace all the panels and the insulation. Instead of improving the eradicator, the scientists suggest that you recategorize it as a lethal weapon instead of a field decontaminant. Now, there's an option to activate the current prototype in this room, but don't trigger it. If you do, a device in the far corner of the room will shoot arcs of electricity across the room. This can kill you in one shot at lower levels, but at higher levels it's not very dangerous. On the table next to this device is Tesla Science Magazine issue number 7, US Army Goes to Space, which grants +5 critical damage to energy weapons. When we exit through the door in the back of the room, we hear a voice calling out to us from a locked room.
Who's there? Come around the side. Who are you?
What the hell is going on here?
I don't know. I can't remember. I can't remember anything. The gas. It's the gas. It's in my head. I can't get it out. I can't get it out.
Repeat.
You.
A chemical leak has been detected.
Are you?
Please.
It's okay. I'm a friend.
Are you? I don't remember. I don't remember anything. What do I do? What do I do?
Open the door. It'll be all right.
Look, I am not one to feel sorry for raiders, but this poor person was terrified.
Here, have to get out!
She couldn't think straight. She didn't know who or where she was. I wonder if we can hold a gunner accountable for his or her actions when she's in such a mental state that she doesn't even know where she is, that she doesn't even know who she is. No matter what dialogue option you choose, she runs out of the building screaming, terrified. Even though that gunner was peaceful, the majority of them are violent. Even though they are confused, it's a choice between their lives or yours, and so you are forced to gun them down. In a nearby room, we find 2 Protectrons and a Protectron charging terminal, but sadly this terminal does not accept the Protectron override software, so you can release them, but you can't turn them into companions. Coming up the stairs, and we find yet another group of gunners having a gunfight. Once they are dealt with, we can loot the room, which appears to be an open floor plan office area. On one of the tables, we find a paper note that says, "Note from Eric." This is a letter from the CEO of the company. This desk must belong to Paul, and Paul is in accounting. Eric says, "Look, the guys over in research and development have put on a good show for the government, but I'm afraid that the government is going to weasel out of their contracts. I need you to cook the books. Make our financials this quarter shine. I don't care how, just do it. The last thing I need right now is for you to spook the investors." Taking a look at Paul's terminal, and we get a better idea of what the CEO was talking about. There are two drafts of the same document, third quarter financials. In draft 1, we learn that Hallucigen has lost $1.8 billion in third quarter. It includes a quote from CEO Eric Rice that says, "This has been a difficult quarter with significant delays in several major product lines." Paul must have sent this rough draft to Eric, and Eric wrote him the note that we just read telling him, "Look, make our financials look better so that our investors don't leave." Paul rewrote this press release, and we find a draft in Draft 2. In this press release, he says, Hallucigen is pleased to report third quarter revenue of $1.1 billion. So he goes from losing $1.8 billion in Draft 1 to making $1.1 billion in Draft 2. That is some pretty clever accounting if he can pull that out. He even includes a brand new quote from Eric Rice, saying, "Our long-term contracts have provided us with a strong financial foundation." He's using a whole lot of words to say very little. But we walk away from this terminal knowing that Hallucigen is corrupt. They're conducting fatal experiments on unwilling participants. They have private sector investors that expect results. They have military contracts with the government to provide the government with crowd control weaponry, but they are not making any money. As you move through the door, we hear over the PA that an emergency lockdown is in effect. Entering into the next room, and we find a series of test chambers with glass roofs and locked doors. Inside some of the chambers are some trapped gunners. They must have been fighting with each other inside the chambers when the emergency lockdown happened. You can release them and kill them if you want, but they are part of an interesting event later on, so I recommend keeping these doors closed for now. There is one door that is permanently stuck open. Moving on through it, you can find some random loot and then climb on up above the test chambers using a collapsed roof. You can walk on top of the glass and watch the gunners fight each other in the cells. Moving through the door on the far end, we climb some stairs to end up in an observation room.
Welcome to the Hallucigen Labs observation area. Please step up to the windows for a demonstration of our products in development.
Die, 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 die!
Hallucigen's dispersant is ideal for peacefully clearing an area of civilians. Hallucigen is not responsible for any damage, injury, or loss of life sustained in mass panics that may or may not result from the use of dispersant. Hallucigen gas. Reliable crowd control since 2055.
Evacuate.
Hallucigen gas can stop a riot faster than any other product on the market, and without the messy side effects of our competitors' offerings. Use with caution. Unpredictable sensory experiences may result. Subjects exposed to high dosages may suffer catastrophic adrenal failure.
If you think I'm pushing any of those buttons, you must be crazy.
Criminal scum? Don't get a gun. Try Hallucigen Suppressor, a safe, reliable, and effective way to paralyze even armored targets. Side effects may include the partial and/or complete paralysis of the user, bystanders, small animals, and/or large animals. Discretion is advised. InvisiWave from Hallucigen is a new advance in the field of stealth technology, capable of doing away with cumbersome personal generators forever. Some subjects may become inaudible and/or intangible. Effects may be permanent. Further research is ongoing. Hallucigen's eradicator provides your forces with a state-of-the-art field decontamination solution.
What?
Well, that was easy.
Small amounts of residual radiation may persist in the affected area. Dosage subject to change pending safety evaluations.
The nearby observation terminal completes the picture. The scientists of Hallucigen would greet VIPs in this room. These were likely military contacts, local law enforcement, and other people interested in their riot control weaponry. They would then activate the automated demonstration system which we just watched. This company was exposing US citizens off the street to chemicals and weapons that killed them, all before a live audience. Malfunctions were common. They say that if a malfunction occurs, trigger a different demonstration to switch focus. In the event of a catastrophic failure, escort the VIPs to the conference room for a marketing presentation. Then, and most disturbingly of all, one of the final bullet points is, clear the lab of test subjects, blood, and fluids. The eradicator was the final weapon they tested here, because remember we read earlier that it was so powerful that it destroyed the test chamber itself. It must have been a grisly scene because the terminal says, immediately after testing the eradicator, escort the VIPs out and on to the marketing presentation. I guess Hallucigen didn't want the VIPs seeing the charred, burned, mangled corpses. Immediately after testing the eradicator, they were to notify facilities to replace the test chamber. This was the radiation device that destroyed biochemicals in the atmosphere and likely melted the faces off of people. Moving along the hallway, we come to a staircase. When you go down one floor, you find a door to the right. You can leap over a gap in the floor to reach the CEO's office room. This is Eric's office. In his terminal, we find one entry, an appointment calendar. We see the appointment with Paul where he talked about third quarter financials. That's when he wrote Paul a note saying, fudge the numbers. Humorously, at 12:30, he has lunch with someone named Dr. Everill, who was on the ethics review board. They're going to be talking about using these human subjects in their experimentation. As an aside, he says, offer Dr. Everill water. Of course, the drugged water. At 2 o'clock, he had a meeting with Colonel Thomas Nelson from the U.S. Army, and in parentheses he says, Scythe. Now this is the second time we've learned about the Scythe program from reading these terminals. I covered the first account in my movie called The Toymaker, where I talked about the story of Arlen Glass. At Arlen Glass's former place of business, Wilson Automatoys, we find that Mark, the CEO, was working with the US government for Project Scythe. Project Scythe was a program that made it easy for the United States military to respond to threats domestically in cities and towns. Mark at Wilson Automatoys was making landmines for the Scythe program. It looks like Hallucigen was making crowd control weaponry for the Scythe program. The day the bombs dropped was a busy day for CEO Eric. At 4 o'clock, he was going to have a sales meeting with Colonel Nelson based on the previous demonstration. Now that we know more about the company's financials, this must have been a big sale that they needed to land. From here, you can also unlock the safe, which has some decent randomized loot. Heading back and down to the bottom of the stairs, we reach the basement, only to discover a wounded gunner in the corner.
Hi.
You aren't real! You aren't real! Bugs!
Here, kitty, kitty, kitty.
Get away! Get away!
He's not hostile, but he's not sane. What's the right call? Do you let him suffer or put him out of his misery? Going through the last door, we enter a room with a locked double door at the end of the hallway. You can hack the terminal with expert lockpicking, but if your lockpicking isn't high enough, you can go through the side door to hack a novice terminal, which is going to be much easier. From here, you can do an office-wide password reset, allowing you access to all of the terminals in the building. Once done, you can open the double doors in the next room. In this room, you get doused with some unknown chemical that starts to drain your health.
Chemical leak has been detected. Please evacuate the building.
If you race to the end of the hallway, you can get past it without dying. Alternatively, you can bypass the gas by heading to the left and crawling through a hole in the wall. In this room, you can access a terminal to turn on the decontamination sprays, which turns off the harmful gas. We never learn which gas this is. Perhaps this was the same effect as the eradicator. The next room is filled with bodies, and we get attacked by an invisible gunner he has used as stealth boy. Once dead, we find 2 notes on his body. The first is called Hallucigen Mission Brief. The client is listed as classified, but the objective of this mission, the reason the Gunners were here, was to secure pre-war military tech. The anonymous client specifically wanted more information about the Invisiwave and Eradicator weapon technologies. The Gunners were to download the schematics of these weapons from the mainframe. This Gunner also left behind a private note. When the Gunners broke into the lab, they accidentally knocked over some of the canisters, releasing the hallucinogen gas, which got sucked into the building's ventilation, causing the entire building to become exposed. His Gunners turn on him. He had to kill 2 of them, Locke and Harold, who drew their guns on him. His final words are harrowing. Hurts so much. Can hear them. Voices. They're coming. They're coming. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop. We find the final hallucigen terminal in this room. This is the mainframe that the Gunners were going to download schematics from. The first entry is about Invisiwave. We learn that this technology was completely made up. Invisiwave was comprised of 5 mirrors, 2 hacked stealth boys, and a trap door. The problem is that the military admiral whom they showed this technology to was so impressed that they ordered 200 units by December. So now the scientists here at Hallucigen have to invent the Invisiwave technology, which they already sold. Completely incompetent, and the rest of the terminal entries show that the Hallucigen scientific team are all equally incompetent. The next note is about the eradicator. This is the one that destroyed biochemicals and ruined the test chamber. Subjects and the test chamber received 5,100 rads worth of radiation. That's why it was so powerful. The scientist notes that observers left the viewing room before the subject's skin disintegrated. The problem is that Hallucigen is selling the eradicator as a handheld field decontamination device. Management asks, okay, so you've built a 2-ton machine that irradiates people, but how are you going to sell that as a handheld field decontamination device? Although he does praise the scientists for getting the VIPs out of the observation room before things got, quote, messy. The next one talks about their testing of a dispersant. They said that after being exposed, the subject failed to recover. She ran screaming at the sight of her own child waiting for her in the waiting room. Police managed to apprehend her and they institutionalized her. I went to the Parsons State Insane Asylum, but I didn't find any record from this date about someone being institutionalized who was crazy or under the influence of drugs. So I'm not sure what asylum this person was sent to. But management is less than pleased. The direct manager says this entire line of research is a joke. The dispersant is supposed to stop riots, not start them. I'm transferring the project to someone else. Send your files and destroy your samples, then clean your desk out. He straight up fires this scientist. The only somewhat successful product that Hallucigen created is the Hallucigen gas. The problem is that it still causes traumatic adrenal gland rupture and frenzy in 4 out of 5 subjects. It is possible for people to acclimate to the gas, but the only test subject who began to acclimate was beaten to death by the other test subjects. Instead of changing the formula, management suggests that they use it as a military-grade chemical weapon instead of using it on their own citizens, as it was intended. If they just reclassify it as military use only, not civilian use, then they don't have to do any more work. The final entry is about the suppressor, which was an experimental crowd pacification device. We learned that the lead scientist on this suppressor was the lead engineer of the Mesmetron. That's right, the Mesmetron from Fallout 3. This was the device that you were to use to enslave people and send them to Paradise Falls. That lead engineer was working on this device but failed horribly. The device successfully incapacitated people, but it paralyzed them permanently. Test subjects were transferred to Medford Memorial Hospital for monitoring. Management is less than pleased. They say, "You're the highest paid researcher here. You worked on the Mesmetron. I expected better." The Gunners came here on behalf of an anonymous client looking for pre-war tech, specifically the Invisiwave and the Eradicator technologies. Invisiwave ended up being a hoax, made literally out of smoke and mirrors. And the Eradicator was not a mobile device. It was locked in one room and it weighed 2 tons. Both technologies completely useless to whichever anonymous client sent the Gunners. Which raises an interesting question. Who was the anonymous client? I doubt very much that it would be the Brotherhood of Steel. They have their own army, they have their own military. If they were interested in anything in Hallucigen, they would have gone themselves. What group do we know has a penchant for hiring mercenaries? Oh, I don't know, mercenaries to sneak into vaults and kidnap children? Which group do we know uses informants all over the Commonwealth, including mercenaries and traitors? My bet is that the Institute hired these gunners to go to Hallucigen and retrieve for them these two weapons, Invisawave and Eradicator. What would they have used them for? Probably something so horrible we couldn't even imagine it. But back to the quest with Fred, we need to get some strange chemicals for this guy. You find glowing green canisters in this room. These are Hallucigen gas canisters. You also find destroyed ones. These are the ones that the gunners accidentally cracked open. But there are still half a dozen or so whole canisters that you can bring to Fred. While you're here, get as many as you possibly can, and then head back to Good Neighbor and give one to Fred Allen to complete the quest.
I think I found a drug that even you'd think twice about huffing.
That's so. Far out. Can't wait to start breaking this down in the lab. Here's your payment. In full. As promised.
Now, the game doesn't tell you that once you loot these gas canisters, you can use them to craft hallucigen grenades at any chemistry station. The trick is that you have to have them in your inventory. If you put them in your workbench, the recipe will not appear in your chemistry station. You actually have to take them out of your workbench and put them in your character's inventory for the recipe to appear. Once it does, you can craft the hallucigen grenade. Bear in mind, though, that there are a finite number of hallucigen gas canisters in the game. They do not respawn in Hallucigen, so once you use them up, they are gone forever. But the hallucigen grenade is really interesting. Here I am experimenting with it on some Brotherhood of Steel soldiers, and it sends them into a frenzy.
Lock and load. Target located.
Target down.
But strangely enough, people around you don't seem to realize that this change of behavior in their comrades came from you. So you can throw as many of these around as you want without having an entire town turn on you.
What I wouldn't give for Come here. Right Let me in. Shot on sight.
I'll suppress. Standing down.
Honor and glory.
Strangely enough, though, these do not work on very important NPCs. I tried throwing them at important merchants, quest givers, or high-ranking members of the Brotherhood of Steel, and the gas canisters had no effect. So it looks like it really only works on randomly generated NPCs. We're talking raiders, Brotherhood of Steel soldiers, and the like. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the dark and twisted full story of the Hallucigen Company in Fallout 4. We expect stuff like this from Vault-Tec, but Hallucigen puts Vault-Tec to shame. These guys drug people, kidnap people, experiment on them against their will, melt their faces off, and then clean up their bodily fluids later. Their experiments were smoke and mirrors, half of them didn't even work. All of this corruption ended in 2077 when the bombs dropped. Perhaps this, then, is at least one small silver lining to this nuclear cloud. What did you think of Hallucigen, ladies and gentlemen? Was it as twisted as you remember from the game? Did it surprise you like it surprised me? Did you know that you could turn the Hallucigen gas canisters into actual grenades? Let me know in the comments section below. I read all of your comments and I use them as inspiration for my future videos. If you'd like to chat about this topic with other like-minded individuals on my Oxhorn Discord server, be sure to click on the invitation link below. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers gain access to a private channel on my Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so glad that you're here watching this video today. Thanks for watching from the bottom of my heart, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, with a brand new video.